wind power is now putting forward really exciting plans for offshore wind in Brazil. Hendrik Andersen, CEO of Vestas, the largest wind turbine and wind energy company in the world. Mary Quaney, the CEO of Mainstream Renewable Power, a global wind developer and operator. Mika Obayashi, from the Japan, director of the Japan Renewable Energy Institute, who we worked for many years on accelerating Japan's energy transition and creating a framework for offshore wind in Japan. And last, but definitely not least, Francesca La Camera, Director General of IREDA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, who we work very closely with, and we'll be working even more closely in the years to come. I'll pass over now to Francesca to say some opening words.
Thank you, Ben. It's nice to be with friends. I'm quite happy that I gained the chance to meet with the minister, the other friends, and I feel in a friendly environment. That's good. So it's my pleasure to address this meeting today, and naturally I have to thank you for the space that you are offering me more extent for your work, actually, for putting us together. And one of the most positive aspects of working on renewables that in front of the problem that we have, which is climate change, we can always look at with a positive view on our capacity to win the battle against the climate change. And in this respect, the wind, so the offshore, the onshore, is absolutely great opportunity. And I will give you some numbers to make clear what is at stake, what is the ambition that we need to have when we talk about wind. So if we have any hope to stay in the 1.5 pathway, among other things, we need to install 2,000 gigawatts of new offshore wind capacity by 2050, up from 35 gigawatts today. And this means that we need to replicate every year the 35 gigawatts that we have in total until now, every year. And when we arrive to 2030, we have to move from 35 to 70 gigawatts every year until 2050. So we have to install before 2030 380 gigawatts. And this what is the number that is in the contract that we have presented to GWEC in the occasion of the high level dialogue on energy. So there is no doubt, it's evident how the challenge is high in front of us, and we have not to hide this. And we know that over the past 2 decades, countries as Belgium, Denmark, China, Germany, and the UK have led the offshore energy development. This is what is happening. With China last year, we got capacity. But so we see that as the time is passing and changing. What we said yesterday, I think that Bob Dylan was already thinking about today when he said the answer my friend is war in the wind. But in the same time, there was my colleague from Denmark that remembered me that it's not the only song of Bob Dylan, but the other one is time changing. So to see where we are, and time are we changing. So the EU Green Deal is aiming for 60 gigawatt of offshore wind by 2030. In the same period, Ireland aims to develop 5 gigawatts, the Netherlands 11 gigawatts, Poland 3.8 gigawatts. France is planning tenders of 1 gigawatt per year until 2028. Outside Europe, Japan is a key emerging market with 45 gigawatts targeted by 2040. The Republic of Korea with 12 gigawatts, and India with 30 gigawatt target by 2030. Naturally, they are very good numbers, but they are far from where we have to be if you want to keep our progress. So this due also to the recognition that offshore winds hold an answer to several challenges. And that seems is emerging enough clear in my mind. So talking with people, one of the reasons is that it allows countries to take advantage of the generally higher and sometimes smoother wind resource offshore as compared to, that the sea, so they bring some kind of breeze, a kind of wind. It's also avoids some of the challenges associated with onshore wind, so the social acceptance. So sometimes it's easier to go offshore than onshore. And the other aspect that I didn't consider, that my people put in my paper, so now I look at it, that in fact, the large part of the population is living in coastal area. So also feeding with clean electricity, the mega cities that are close to the sea could be an important aspect of this new adventure. As if the number make clear how the challenge is high, it's not unrealistic. We can reach the goal that we have defined for our activities, and it's amazing to see. That all the costs of renewable are decreasing year after year, but after 10 years of price decreasing, that the last year the cost has decreased by 9%. It's really something. So it's really something, and this trend will continue. So this is important, and we know that now more than 70% of current offshore wind installations are in North Sea and nearby Atlantic Ocean. With the right kind of policy, international cooperation, we think that so much can be done in this respect. And it's not only a question of cost, it's also a question of benefits. So we know that already, that ARENA is from 2012 that is monitoring the jobs in renewable energy. And in our last report, we made clear how today 1.25 million people are employed in the wind sector. And this means 2 times the jobs that were in the area in 2012. So in 8 years, we doubled the jobs in the wind. So this is important. And as we know, and this is my last number, from our job report that we published just a few weeks ago in collaboration with International Labour Organization, in the last year, the year of the pandemic, the jobs in the wind in the renewable has been increased by 500,000 in 1 year. So it's an unbelievable trend. So going for renewables, going for offshore wind is not only good for the environment, but it's already important, but it's also important for our economies and our societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. I'd like to introduce now our moderator today. Sylvie Goyer is the advisor to the Vice President of the Fondation Franz Albert II of Monaco. This event is actually being organized in conjunction and partnership with the Because the Ocean initiative that Sylvie perhaps will say a few words about. And welcome, Sylvie. And Sylvie will be moderating this panel. I invite everyone to take your seats, and I will sit in the audience.
And start the introduction and invite all the panelists on stage. Mary, and by the way, thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, I'll be asking the hard questions with a kind tone, don't worry. So my name is Sylvie. Indeed, I work as senior advisor to Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. The foundation, as you may know, is headed by the sovereign prince, and we work a lot on ocean issues, and we've been instrumental since COP21 in Paris, pushing ocean agenda into the UNFCCC mechanisms and into the COP. And you hear a lot more, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here to see all the attention, increased attention to ocean-based solutions at COPs, and it's swimming everywhere. So we're very pleased with that. At the foundation, we're very pleased with that, because the ocean, as was mentioned, is an initiative that helped spearhead this issue. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a great panelist, Minister, Directors, Excellencies. Thanks a lot for being with us. I'll start, if I may, asking you just each of you a quick question, just to give us and the audience your state of play, your targets there over the next 5 years of how to basically increase ocean-based solutions into the national energy systems. How do you see that coming? Maybe I'll start with you, Minister, if you don't mind. What's your state of play? What's your topics in Brazil?
Of course, I don't mind. I come from the sea. I am a sailor. About the sea, about the oceans. And, I used to say that the oceans are the last frontier of humankind. And I think this will be the future of our energy matrix and many other things. When we talk about figures, like my friend Francesco mentioned a few moments ago, and let me start from the beginning. First, I'd like to say that I am very honored to be here in my second COP26, especially to be here among friends from Brazil, friends from UK, friends from Italy, friends from many countries. Monaco, yes, from Monaco. And this will be my last day at my second COP. And the impression I have from this COP26 is a very good one. I think we have advanced a lot from Madrid to Glasgow, and I think we'll have very good outcomes from this COP26. I think the work is more integrated, cooperative, and I think we will increase this for the next years, for the next COP that will be held that next year. But let's come back to the ocean. You know, for a country like Brazil, with more than 7,000 kilometers of coastline, the ocean means everything to the economy, to the future of our society. And we have a lot of resources in Brazil, and the sea is one of the most important. We call our ocean Blue Amazon because we consider the importance of the ocean for Brazil, the Atlantic Ocean for Brazil, like the Amazon, the onshore Amazon is to the Brazilian people. Then I think for Brazil, the ocean will continue to be a very important resource of development, of cooperation with other countries, and of course for energy.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your insights, and good to hear you see great outcome coming out of the COP. Thanks for being here. Didn't know you were a sailor before, but you have your 2 feet in the
Not
ocean.
before, forever.
Still now. You have your 2 feet strongly in the ocean. Good to hear. May I ask, maybe Mika or Mary, what's your state? What's the state of play? How do you see, what are your targets in terms of ocean-based energies in the national ocean systems? We had great figures just earlier on. What's your take on this?
thank you very much for them appointed me as the next to the minister. And actually, the last several years, we have encouraged the government to have a higher ambitious target of offshore wind in Japan, because the previous target was 0.86 gigawatt by 2030. So we say that we have to have much more ambitious target to give the right direction to the market. And then now the government, as already the DC camera pointed out, that the government has a huge number, 45 gigawatt by 2040. But you know that it is very difficult numbers for Japan, but at the same time, this is less ambitious in terms of the climate neutrality that we have to achieve. So, so the next step that we have to do is that we have to encourage the government to have the more transparent market to implement the introduction of offshore wind in a very fair, competitive way, and reduce the cost of offshore wind to reach the target of 2030. 2030 target is 10 gigawatt of project is mature or something like that. So, so that is the next step that we have to do. So have the kind of the guidelines for industries and communities to reach that next 2030.
Thanks a lot, Mika. Great insights from Brazil and Japan in terms of your vision and your targets. May I ask now, we've seen and I acknowledge the alliance that was just mentioned earlier. This is great progress. Now, as we know, in small island developing states, where I was fortunate to work for many years, and in some of the developing countries, we're still far behind in offshore wind, in ocean-based energy. Why that? What could be the constraints? You mentioned market, so there might be issues with technology, there might be issues with finance. Why isn't it picking up as fast in small island developing states and in developing countries? Marion, maybe you have some idea?
Thank you, Sylvie. So coming from the perspective of being a global developer of offshore wind as well as onshore wind and solar PV, you know, I completely agree. And as an industry, we fully see the potential for the industry to scale up very significantly and to achieve the 2,000 gigawatts by 2050 from where we are today is an enormous journey that we need to embark on, and it's not moving fast enough. From the private sector's perspective, there is a very, very strong demand and I would say a surplus of private capital seeking to invest in developing and owning and operating offshore wind. And the fact, I think, is that markets are not opening up fast enough, and seabed is not being awarded for these fast enough because there is a shortage of opportunities. So part of what we do, and also with GWEC and with various industry bodies right around all of our geographies, is working to encourage the facilitation of offshore wind seabed to be developed. There's a pool of developers now, including new developers such as the oil and gas entrants, who also have significant amounts of capital to invest. So I would encourage markets to really focus on the development of offshore wind. What we did here in the UK as industry coming together across all stakeholders, including with government, was to really sit down and explore and unblock the challenges to developing offshore wind at scale. And we set very at the time, very ambitious targets in terms of decreasing the cost of the power, in terms of establishing a supply chain, in terms of establishing maybe this is a hint to start talking. Thank you, Harry. But then industry, government, and all stakeholders across the marine ecosystem working closely together in a very collaborative and constructive forum. We established an industry at scale. Clearly, it's the leading offshore wind market, or certainly one of them globally. And that approach I would encourage to really focus on, across all emerging markets, because that's probably the biggest challenge, is to set the ambition, exceed the ambition, and open up the seabed for development.
Thanks a lot, Mary, for your insights. May I ask Henrik to follow up on that from a manufacturer perspective? How do you see that develop? I mean, we've seen great progress in Europe, in Asia Pacific, in Asia, not really the Pacific. I haven't seen any. How do you see from a manufacturer's perspective that development picking up?
I would say here, first of all, thank you, Minister. I will be traveling to Brazil Monday night, so I will be in Brazil to see both customers and also the very, very strong and accelerated development of the onshore wind, which now can be extended into offshore wind. And by the way, has created thousands of new jobs in Brazil in factories, with some of them I saw in Denmark that were being trained and developed in the back end of 19 before COVID started, and then they started the factories in the beginning of 2020. So it is possible, and that's just to say from a manufacturing point of view, when governments put up not ambitious target or wishful thinking, but practical plans for putting capacity in place and let the capacity follow permitting, then actually you will gain a renewable capacity in every country you plan for. So from an OEM and a manufacturing point of view, we of course have been around for now 4 decades. And Francisco, I would take a little bit of positives away in this, because we talk about 2,000 gigawatts almost as a possibility of mankind. But listen to this. In 2000, the world has installed 12 gigawatt of wind. In 2010, that number was 185 gigawatt. And in 2020, it was 785 gigawatt. So it is possible with, first of all, the technology advancement and the capacity planning. But if I may say, as a manufacturer and somebody that works with customers around the globe, including Mary, and also in Japan, planning for how we go in a roadmap together in 2030 and 2040, I am actually getting a little tired of seeing the theoretical ambitious targets being increased every time we have a difference that develops of what we need and what needs to be done. So when we see those targets increasing, it becomes further and further away from what is actually being done. And that's scary, because that's not how you run a normal business. If I invest this, has a budget or I have a plan and I'm moving away from that, then I normally call my leadership team together and saying, how do we catch up to that plan we had? And if we can't catch up, we set a lower target so we know that we can catch. In political sphere, it seems like every time you are away from the target and you can see you can't reach your renewable target, you double the target and then you think, now we have fixed it. That's unfortunately doesn't work like that. And I will just I have a little spreadsheet, and it's my spreadsheet because it will create a little political uproar somewhere. But I have the ones where it says, what have you done in the last 24 months as a country? And then I use that speed of execution to test if your ambitious targets out here, when will they actually be realized? For a very green country like Denmark, here is the fact. If we continue with the same pace as we have done in the last 24 months, we will achieve Denmark's 2030 target in 2104. I'll be dead and long gone. My daughters might be able to experience some of it, and it will be my grandchildren. But this is the target we have in 2030 in one of the greenest nations in the world. And we're talking about 80 years to execute a 10-year plan. So Francisco, I hold a lot of opportunity. We can build capacity in Brazil, as we just illustrated to do. We can do that in any country. We can do it in any, also Middle East, and we are doing it. But it has to be with proper permitted targets following. And I can hear Mary, if she gets the permitting, I will deliver the turbines, and then we have renewable energy to follow it. So that's my little plea for everyone to take away from here, because this is an environment where you easily get an afternoon in dreamland.
Thank you very much, Henrik. It's a very clear, loud call for practical targets. I think we heard it all. And a gentle invitation to Your Excellency. You may be meeting in Brazil very soon. Huh?
He has done it, so he sits here in the sunshine.
Okay, excellent.
On Tuesday.
Excellent. Minister, if I may, as we mentioned technology, can you tell me a little bit about your vision as to game-changing technologies in Brazil or in other countries? What's your vision of technology? How is technology going to help really develop offshore wind and ocean-based solutions?
Help a lot. I'd like to start saying that just for you, Francesco, you know that in Brazil, renewables are our energy life. We have a renewable matrix. 85% of our matrix is renewable. The potential for the offshore wind in Brazil is 700 gigawatts.
When do we start?
Okay, that's going to be a comment right after that, if I may.
Let's talk about cost reduction first.
Yeah.
Here we are. We ready. We take the coffee next.
Yeah, this is very good. But I have some figures, for example, onshore wind in Brazil in 2014 was 1% of our power matrix. Today is 12% of our power matrix. It's about 18 gigawatts. Is that right?
Right.
And it will be 35 gigawatts in 2030. We are talking about 8 years. We are talking about $10 billion in investments in only this energy source. This will be very nice. And of course, offshore wind is part of our energy planning. We have two energy plans in Brazil. One is our 10-year energy expansion plan that is updated every year, and we'll publish the next one in February. And offshore wind will be included in this plan. This is important. This represents that this is in our radar. But talk about technology. You asked me about this. In our point of view, there is no single technological route or energy source to, let's say, achieve all the goals we have. We consider that each country has to take into consideration their characteristics, their development, and their competitive advantages. This is what we have been doing in Brazil from the last 10 years, I should say. And this is our point of view, and I think that the future is related to these characteristics of each region, of each country, and of course, the international cooperation that we already have in meat and other sources will be very important, and transfer of technology also. If not, we will not achieve these goals. We have development countries, we have developed countries, then we have to mix this and to go for a better future.
Thank you, Minister. Excellent points indeed. The message is really to tailor the technology, tailor the action, the solution to the country, to the particular context in the country. That gets me to a question that you hear in the news all the time in terms of social acceptability. We hear that in some of the countries, it's there's some resistance. There's some issues with acceptability, in particular from our colleagues from the fishing. There's another event over there on fishing. What would you recommend to enhance social acceptability, to really so that all of the stakeholders are with you and really adhere to the targets? Mary, maybe you have some ideas.
Yeah, so from, again, the perspective of social acceptability, I would say that the key is, and our approach is to engage with stakeholders as early as possible in the development cycle, so that then we work on our plans for developing and permitting the offshore wind farm in conjunction with all of the local stakeholders, so from marine transport to fishing. Obviously, the environmental impact is an enormous focus for us. And actually, to be honest, I would disagree that there is a concern around the social acceptance of offshore wind, because our experience has been quite the opposite. And that is because of that early stage involvement with all of the key stakeholders, because clearly developing an infrastructure asset in the seabed, but again, similar to our approach to onshore wind and solar PV, it's working with the stakeholders, working with the local communities, and then ensuring that the asset has the social license, and that's earned through the development cycle, which then that trust is earned and then is an asset for the project as it goes into construction and then into operations. And a community clearly needs to then understand the benefits of what it is that we're seeking to deliver. So again, an educational aspect is a very important focus of ours through the development cycle. And the development cycle for offshore wind, can be over several years. It is over several years. So there's a lot of time involved in working with schools and with all of the areas within the community, so as to explain what it is that we're doing, and so that there are then no surprises when it comes to the actual construction and then the operations of the asset. And another point actually that I would add to what Francesco said earlier on in terms of the great benefits of offshore wind, another one is also, to me, it's a very clear example of the transition from the oil and gas sector in terms of the transitioning of those skills, many of which are relevant to what Henrik is doing when he's constructing the wind farm and installing the turbines, and investments in ports, many of which have been almost disused due to the decline in the oil and gas sector across different geographies, depending on where we're talking about. And so that reinvestment in a local community in Ireland is a good example, where many of our ports have been starved of investment over decades, and now there's an opportunity to really regenerate and to build up those coastal communities.
Excellent points, Mary. Thanks a lot. Engaging with stakeholders, involving local communities and feeding back to them. Excellent. You want to add a few words from your Japan perspective, Nicola?
Actually, the introduction of offshore wind in Japan means to establish a new industry in Japan. We have just started it. So the current market environment is rather untransparent for each stakeholder. So I think that the first thing that the government has to do is to set the guidance for each stakeholder to get fair information, equal information in the market. Nowadays, that I've heard like a kind of fast come, fast get basis. So we need a kind of a transparent guidance for each stakeholder in the market, and then maybe facilitate the local communities to have their dialogue with developers, and then get the kind of enough knowledge that the offshore wind will bring the new technologies and the new jobs in the rural area and fisher communities. So those kind of the first step is needed in Japan, that I think. And then for that we can learn a lot from Scottish situation and also island situation. we would like to explore as a kind of an institute, actually.
Excellent. So it's great to get your points. Now, some of you mentioned already the introduction and the increased introduction of ocean-based solutions into the NDC, the nationally determined contributions. So we're so used to the acronyms that we forget what it means. Now, NDCs, you may know, the second round of NDCs have just been released. Recent analysis have pointed out that over 80 out of the 124 that have been submitted include ocean-based solutions in various ways. But I suppose it includes as well offshore wind. So I'm just question for all of you. How do you work with your colleagues from the climate change ministries to ensure that they bring in the NDCs, they bring in the ocean solutions that you advocate for? How does that happen? I'll start with you.
Yes, I think this conversation and probably links back to the societies generally being here, and I think we all feel that we are a little bit at a tipping point. Because I think we are all being reminded from our, I have two daughters, 19 and 22, and it's kind of finding a little bit the balance, because I don't think we can keep going and talk about it as it doesn't exist. Everyone now comes to the conclusion of science has been right, and it has been right for several decades. So we are at a tipping point. When it then needs to get into local programs and others, I think it's a balance between what I call the heart and the brain. And when I need to use the heart, I often start talking about my daughters, because that always reminds me of, I have to think next generation. My brain then goes and saying what probably in, for instance, the ocean, the wind, the offshore wind, and to some extent also onshore wind, has battled a little bit what sits back in societies of that we were the non-efficient technology that has to be paid for. And I think that fact still sits out there as a question fact, but it's a 10, 20-year fact wrong, because we reduced levelized cost of energy with 60% in the last 10 years. So today, whatever you compare it with, gas, fossil, nuclear, it's way below, also when it comes to offshore. So I think the important thing to get it into resonate in all local is that you take away, you add the emotions, but you provide the facts. Because if we don't provide the facts, we leave societies with that these jobs are highly subsidized, government paid, which they are not. When we look at the renewable program of wind in Brazil, it is lower electricity price than any other source in Brazil. And the industrial groups are asking for more. It creates jobs. And when you then go into the local communities, you see suddenly young people, for every $10 million, you create 75 jobs in the renewable sector. If you invested in oil and gas, it created 10 new jobs. This will be the same in the offshore. So it provides all the positive for everyone in society. And I think that's where we have to unite brain and heart or brain. And I think we need to clear some of the misunderstandings of facts. So for me, I think, and that's why I'm always quite direct in this, because when you leave today, please go out there and be ambassador for clearing facts, not wrong perception of what was the fact 10 or 20 years ago. Please, because otherwise we will never succeed in doing this.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Henry. Minister, those arguments, I suppose you can use that, and I suppose you talk with your colleague from the Ministry of Climate Change. Is that helping? Are you progressing to really include ocean-based solutions into the climate change plans?
Of course, yes. Yesterday I was talking with Rafael Gross, the day before, Patibirol, good friends of mine, and we are just talking about this. We have to work with transparency, as was mentioned here, and also predictability. Then we will reach all our goals. then we have to work together, public and private sector. And we have been trying to do this in Brazil with governments, with legal and regulatory certainty. This is why we have increasing these new sources of energy in our matrix. Look to the wind, look to the solar, the two sources that increase so fast in Brazil, and you continue so, and the offshore, you also be part of this. Until the end of December, we'll have all the legal and regulatory framework for offshore wind. It's not only a perspective or intention.
And Minister, you should take back and really take the praise because you kept your promise all the way through. Brazil, you kept the promise all the way through to both the capacity, the build out and the permitting. It should give you credit as a country because that's the trust we need as a manufacturer to install and be there and expand more capacity. So thank you. And we should take it back and be proud of it.
All of you are very welcome to Brazil.
That's an open invitation. Huh? The minister says all the manufacturers, developers, you're welcome. to
I only
Brazil.
need one invitation. And by the way, I'll call upon your name if I struggle with the visa on Monday.
But that's it. I think we should go on this way, not only in our countries, but with others also. By the cooperation, the national corporations, my friends here, we have a large cooperation with IRENA. We have to work to update it and even more bring others to work in our energy plans. This will be very important to achieve all the goals we achieve until 2030, until 2050.
Excellent. They're all looking at you. You have quite a job ahead, huh, Irina? We're getting.
Brazil is the renewable paradise for my friend.
Yes, great, great. We're getting close, so before we open up for a few questions from the floor, if you have any, just would like to ask you, if you were to sum up the situation, just 2-3 words, what would you say? Mary?
The oceans are absolutely essential to deliver the transition and to deliver at the scale at which it is required. The oceans and the ability of offshore wind to deliver at scale quickly is like 10, 15 times what can be done on land at least. And we're only at the beginning of that journey. So, putting oceans at the focus of net zero targets, of NDCs, the ability of offshore wind to deliver, the technology is there, it's cost effective. The permitting is world class now at the moment in terms of working with stakeholders, engagements with the environmental aspects. And now it's a case of unleashing that potential.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Mary. Ocean is indeed the solution. Nika, hi.
Actually, this year, the 10th memorial of the big nuclear accident that occurred in Japan in 2011, and also the big earthquake. So Japan is suddenly being forced to move away from nuclear energy, and also that we are facing the difficulties, of course, that more and more integration of fossil fuel now. So the offshore wind is the certain last kind of a utility investment scale energy in Japan now. So that's the reason why that the main industries and major power companies are investing in that offshore wind now. And then that I have been working in this field like several decades, and I'm really happy to see renewable is really becoming cheap. That was my dream used to, and now it's really good that what we are doing could be a profitable business. So I think that we have to accelerate this direction to achieve the 100% of renewables, and then by doing so, integration of offshore wind will encourage other renewables in Japan as well to be integrated in the market.
Thank you very much, Nika. Of course, thoughts and sympathy go with you on the occasion of this 10th anniversary, and glad to see that your dream is coming true now. Huh? Henrik, if I may, just be words. I know we've expanded a bit.
No, I think when we go back in time, and we all have seen some of the people that are not with us anymore, like Steve Jobs and others that came up with sort of saying, don't go away and live somebody else's life. It's here and now. I think right now, I think it's go and commit to do the right things, because the next generation will never forgive us. Because actually we didn't have a financial argument for not getting it done. So now go and get it done.
Go and do it. Yeah, get it done. Damn it, like Harrison Ford said in Marseille. Damn it, go and do it.
Absolutely. Don't look to the sides now. Go and get it done.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the wording. Minister. Harrison Ford.
Actually, you meant that. I could see that in your eyes.
Yeah.
So you could have been that Harrison Ford.
Almost. Minister, in 2-3 words, what would be your key message?
Message is, let's work together.
Excellent, and I've noted down, you've repeated several times cooperation, working together. This is excellent. Thank you. Before we move to the closing, any question from the floor? Anybody has a burning question for our outstanding panelists and speakers? Yes.
So it's really inspiring to hear about what all of you have done to accelerate the offshore wind industry. And wondering, so I'm from the United States, and of course, you know that it's quite far behind in terms of offshore wind installations. What advice or what insights do you think the US can take from each of your countries' experiences to progress their industry?
If you would allow, just last Monday, we announced 2.1 gigawatt with Equinor and BP in the state of New York of offshore wind. So therefore, I think I'm slightly biased towards, I think US are doing the right things. They're doing it with both commitment and also at this point in time, political commitment to get it done. Now we need a little alignment between states and central administration. But I'm sure over the next couple of weeks, we will have a policy alignment in that sense. And then I would be surprised not to see an acceleration. So I actually think here, for now, the first time there has been listening, and now there is an acting. So I'm considering your concern in your tone of voice, I'm slightly more positive on that one, because that will be a build out basically big time from 2025 and onwards.
Thank you. Indeed, policy enablers are the key to unlocking some of the opportunities, and then they will come. Another question? Madam?
Thanks, Sylvia. Actually, it's not a question, it's a comment. I am Elvin Ganon, CEO at the Brazilian Power Association. First, I'd like you to join with me, and we can say thank you, Sylvia. When I started to talk about offshore wind, you said that we will have regulatory framework at the end of this year, and you have the regulatory framework. So nowadays we have 46 gigawatts in environment license. I believe that we have a lot of challenges. It's not regulatory framework. The first that we need to have investors. But I believe that the time to invest or to go to Brazil is now, starting. We have, I believe that there are key messages about the challenge is competitiveness. Brazil is not a country that has subsidies for renewable because we need to serve it. Then we need to put the new technology, and this technology is competitive. Yes, competitiveness is the key words for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Support from the minister.
But the good thing here today is, and this is what the year we're living in, 2021, the years of where you put old technology in different countries and then put new technology in other countries, those days are gone. It's what you introduce in one part of the world is unified to the whole world at the same time. So that one, I think we need to be a little bit more trusted in each other and say new technology will find, because any new technology makes the next investment optimized compared to the previous investment. So part of my discussions the whole next week in Brazil is also what happens after 24 and 25, both on the onshore and the offshore. So that's natural. And so technology will be available. And you have made it in Brazil, if I might be a little sarcastic here, you have made it very fairly difficult to do anything and import into Brazil. So therefore, as long as you do that, then you will also get the capacity when we are ready and have the commitment on it.
Thank you, thank you. That closes the panel. Let me please join me in a big round of applause to this great panel. Thank you very much, all of you. If you allow me, I'll just give quickly a few remarks, just wrapping up some of the key messages. And again, being very partial about it, then I'll hand to Ben for closing. I just got 4 key messages out of this amazing panel and discussions. One, and you heard it loud and clear, ocean-based energies is coming a big, great potential. It's taking a fundamental role in addressing greenhouse gas emission reduction. So it is clearly underlined, and some of my colleagues on the ocean and climate grouping would not deny that. So great potential, together with energy efficiency, together with whole suite of solutions, wind energy and offshore wind energy, clearly the great potential. 2, I've heard a lot of what I consider nexus approach. I mean, we're talking, of course, climate change, but we're also talking energy for all. We're talking just transition with jobs. So we're talking, it's an integrated approach. And offshore wind energy, just like any ocean-based solutions, is indeed an integrated solution addressing a whole suite of SDGs. Minister, you agree with me? Creating jobs, it can address nature-based solutions. You can integrate nature-based solutions as well. So again, this nexus approach, I find it interesting. A third point is about still the challenges, and we've heard challenges in markets, challenges in enabling policy that needs to go in place to facilitate the uptake of the industries and to facilitate the energy. Challenges in terms of stakeholder dialogue and all this. So there's still challenges, but I'm comfortable and reassured with all the goodwill and energy here from the floor. 4th message, and I take that word from you, Minister, it's about cooperation. I mean, great alliance coming out, people coming together, sharing technology, sharing good practices. I think that's a key word coming out of this COP as well. Cooperation, we must do it together. And my final word, of course, goes to Bob Dylan. I mean, what a marvelous quote to start with Bob Dylan and blowing in the wind. I can't agree more. So I'd like to salute that. It's a great way to start. It's a great way to conclude. These are my 4 messages and key remarks. I'll now hand to Ben to please conclude and give his last few remarks.
I will just make one remark, because we're running at the hour now. Once again, to thank all our panelists, I would invite both Brazil and Japan to join the new Offshore Wind Alliance. As soon as COP is over, the hard work begins in getting to these very ambitious targets that we've identified through the UN Compact and with Francesco. So the hard work not only begins for Francesco, but for all of us to get government and industry and stakeholders all moving in the same direction to get this done. So thank you, and we look forward to the next years of working with you.